Admiral Ne stood before the largest gathering of human ships in galactic history. 200 vessels from across human space had answered the call for Operation Mirror. They were not all warships. Many were cargo haulers, medical transports, and exploration vessels. But every ship carried something more valuable than weapons: hope. "Today we do something impossible," Ne announced to the assembled fleet. "We end a war that has raged for 3,000 years, not by winning it, but by showing both sides what they have forgotten." Captain Kyung-soo listened from his bridge aboard the heavy cruiser Soul's Pride. His ship would lead the first wave of the operation, but instead of attacking Vorthak or Nixari forces, they would be doing something much stranger. "All ships, begin Phase 1, Ne ordered, across the galaxy." Human vessels began simultaneously attacking both Vorthak and Nixari supply lines, but they were not destroying the supply convoys. Instead, they were redirecting them. Kyung-soo's task force intercepted a Vorthak crystal convoy carrying materials to build weapons. Instead of destroying the cargo, they used tractor beams and clever maneuvering to steer the convoy toward a war-torn planet, where millions of civilians needed shelter. "Vorthak convoy, your cargo is needed elsewhere," Kyung-soo broadcast. "The people of Kepler 438b require construction materials to rebuild their cities." The Vorthak convoy commander was confused. "These materials are for weapons production. Civilian construction is not our concern." "It is now," Kyung-soo replied, as his ships gently but firmly guided the convoy to the devastated planet. Similar scenes played out across dozens of star systems. Human forces intercepted Nixari bioships carrying adaptive organisms meant for weapons and redirected them to planets where the ecosystems had been destroyed by war. Medical supplies destined for military bases found their way to refugee camps. Building materials for fortresses were diverted to reconstruct schools and hospitals. For the first time in millennia, resources that had been devoted to destruction were being used to build and heal. Crystal Commander Velthera received reports of these activities with growing alarm. The joint Vorthak-Nixari operation she had planned with Kreenox was falling apart before it could begin. Both their supply chains were being disrupted, but not in any way they could fight against. "How do we respond to enemies who steal our supplies to help civilians?" she asked her tactical staff. None of them had an answer. The second phase began when Commander Hae-won implemented the most dangerous part of Operation Mirror. Her task was to arrange something that had never happened in galactic history: a three-way battle where humans fought alongside both aliens against a common enemy. The common enemy turned out to be something both empires had forgotten about: their own automated war machines. Centuries ago, both sides had built fleets of robotic ships to continue fighting even when their organic crews were unavailable. Over time, these machines had been abandoned in remote systems, left to patrol and fight each other forever. Hae-won had found one such system where hundreds of ancient Vorthak crystal drones and Nixari bioautomatons were locked in eternal combat, destroying each other and rebuilding themselves in an endless cycle. "This is Commander Hae-won to all Vorthak and Nixari forces in the region," she broadcast. "We have located a significant threat to all our civilizations. These automated systems have become unstable and are spreading beyond their original boundaries." It was true. The ancient war machines had begun to malfunction, attacking any ship that entered their territory regardless of which side it belonged to. Crystal Commander Velthera arrived with a Vorthak fleet to investigate. Biomarshal Kreenox brought Nixari bioships from the opposite direction. Both found Hae-won's small human force already engaged in battle with the rogue machines. "Human vessel, withdraw immediately," Velthera ordered. "This is Vorthak technology. We will handle it." "Negative," Hae-won replied, as her ship fired on a crystal drone that was targeting a Nixari bioship. "These things are shooting at everyone. We fight together or we all die separately." What followed was the strangest battle in galactic history. Human ships found themselves protecting Vorthak cruisers from Nixari bioautomatons, while Vorthak crystal weapons provided cover for human vessels under attack by their own ancient drones. Biomarshal Kreenox watched in amazement as a human frigate deliberately took damage meant for his flagship. "Why did you do that?" he asked over the communication channel. "Because you were about to be destroyed," replied the human captain simply. "We're all on the same side right now." Velthera found herself in an equally strange situation when her crystal arrays became overloaded. Human engineers actually boarded her ship to help with repairs while the battle raged around them. "Your crystal technology is impressive," said the human engineer as she worked on the alien systems. "But you could improve efficiency by 20% with some simple modifications. You would help us become better at war?" Velthara asked in confusion. "We're helping you survive," the human replied. "War is just temporary. Survival is permanent. The battle lasted for hours." Ancient war machines that had been fighting each other for centuries were finally destroyed by the combined efforts of all three sides. But more importantly, enemies who had never worked together discovered they could. When the last automated ship was destroyed, and strange silence fell over the battlefield, Vorthak, Nexari, and human vessels floated together in space, none sure what to do next. "Thank you," Velthara said finally. The words felt foreign in her crystal throat. "You saved my life," Kreenox admitted to a human captain. "Why?" "Because life is precious," came the simple reply. "Even your lives." That was the moment both alien commanders understood what the humans had been trying to show them. For 3,000 years they had focused so completely on death and destruction that they had forgotten the value of life itself. Captain Deho, who had witnessed the early devastation of the war, now found himself commanding the first mixed-species crew in galactic history. His bridge officer Velthara worked alongside Nexari biopilot Zonketh and human Lieutenant Subin. "Captain," Subin reported, "we're receiving a priority message from Earth. The Galactic Council wants to meet." The Galactic Council had not convened in over 1,000 years. There had been no point when the galaxy was divided into two warring camps. But now, for the first time in millennia, representatives from hundreds of species were gathering to discuss something unprecedented: peace. The meeting took place on a neutral space station that had been abandoned since the war began. Delegates from the Vorthak Empire and Nexari Collective sat in the same room, separated by empty chairs that were slowly filled by representatives from smaller civilizations that had been hiding from the war. Admiral Jiwoo spoke for humanity. "We didn't come here to end your war," she said. "We came here to remind you that you have a choice." Crystal Commander Velthara and Bio-Marshal Kreenox looked at each other across the council chamber. 3,000 years of hatred still existed between them, but something new had been added: the memory of fighting together instead of against each other. "What do you propose?" Velthara asked. "The Terran Accords," Jiwoo replied, placing a document on the table. "Not a peace treaty, because we know you don't understand peace yet. This is something simpler, an agreement to remember that there are alternatives to war." The Terran Accords were unlike any document in galactic history. They didn't demand surrender or impose terms. Instead, they simply established protocols for cooperation during emergencies, procedures for protecting civilians, and guidelines for converting military resources to reconstruction efforts. Both empires signed, not because they were ready for peace, but because they had been reminded that choice existed. The war didn't end overnight. Conflicts still erupted between Vorthak and Nexari forces, but now there were protocols for de-escalation. Ancient hatred still existed, but they were tempered by new memories of cooperation. Most importantly, both civilizations began to remember skills they had lost. Vorthak crystal engineers started designing buildings instead of only weapons. Nexari bioshapers created new life forms for terraforming instead of just for battle. Captain Deho stood on his bridge, looking out at stars that no longer seemed hostile. His mixed crew worked together smoothly, Vorthak precision combining with Nexari adaptability and human creativity. "Where to next, Captain?" asked Lieutenant Subin. Deho smiled. "Anywhere we want. The galaxy is finally open for exploration again." The eternal war was over, not because it was won, but because everyone involved had finally remembered that wars are supposed to end. The galaxy still had problems, conflicts still arose, but now there were people who knew how to solve problems instead of just fight them. Humanity had arrived in the galaxy and changed everything, not through superior technology or overwhelming force, but by refusing to accept that any situation was hopeless. They had looked at a 3,000-year-old war and simply asked the question no one else had thought to ask: why don't you just stop? And surprisingly, after all those years, both sides finally had an answer. Maybe we should. The stars shined a little brighter, and for the first time in millennia, the galaxy was at peace. Crystal Commander Velthara stood in the center of the Vorthak analysis chamber. The room was made entirely of blue crystal that hummed with energy. Around her, dozens of tactical analysts worked at their stations, trying to understand what had happened during the encounter with the humans. "Report," Velthara commanded. Tactical analyst Zephron stepped forward. His crystal body reflected the blue light of the chamber as he spoke. "The humans should not have been able to interfere with our systems. Their technology is primitive beyond measure. No energy shields, no quantum weapons, no crystal matrices, yet they forced us to retreat." "Yes, Commander, and we still do not understand how." Across the galaxy, in the living chambers of a Nexari bioship, a similar conversation was taking place. Biostrategist Mordella floated in a pool of nutrient fluid while smaller organisms swam around her, carrying information through the ship's nervous system. "The humans are spreading," she reported to the ship's consciousness. "They have established contact with 17 different species in just 6 months. None of them have been enslaved or destroyed." The ship's voice came from everywhere at once like a whisper in Mordella's mind. "This is unusual. New species typically choose a side in the war or are eliminated. The humans refuse to choose. They call themselves neutral traitors and somehow make both our forces and the Vorthak leave them alone." Meanwhile, Captain Moonho was having his own problems with staying neutral. His frigate Jeju Storm had been attacked by a Nexari biocruiser while carrying medical supplies to a refugee colony. The alien ship was 10 times larger than his vessel, and its bioweapons were eating through his hull like acid through paper. "Engineering, I need options," Moonho shouted over the sound of alarms. Engineer Boram's voice came through the intercom, calm despite the chaos around them. "Captain, our weapons can't hurt that thing, but I have an idea." "What if we don't try to hurt it?" "Explain quickly." "We have maybe 5 minutes before they break through the main hull. The life support system. If I reverse the air recyclers and overload them with ship's power, I can create an electromagnetic pulse. It won't hurt us because we use separate systems, but bioships use electrical signals to control their functions." It was crazy. It was dangerous. If Boram made a mistake, they would all suffocate in space. But staying still meant certain death from the Nexari weapons. "Do it," Moonho ordered. Boram worked quickly, rerouting power cables and connecting systems that were never meant to work together. The ship's lights dimmed as all available energy flowed into the improvised weapon. "EMP ready, Captain." "Fire!" The pulse erupted from Jeju Storm like a wave of invisible energy. It washed over the Nexari biocruiser, and something amazing happened. The living ship suddenly went limp. Its weapons stopped firing. Its tentacles stopped moving. The biocruiser began to drift helplessly through space. Moonho stared in amazement. "Did we kill it?" "No, sir," Boram replied. "I think we just gave it a really bad headache. Its nervous system is probably confused, but it will recover soon. Then let's not be here when it wakes up." Jeju Storm limped away from the disabled Nexari vessel, another human ship that had survived by doing the impossible. Dr. Eunji was beginning to understand why these encounters kept happening. As humanity's leading expert on alien biology, she had been studying reports from every human contact with the Vorthak and Nexari. What she discovered was disturbing. "Admiral Jiwoo," she said during their video call, "I think I know why we keep winning these fights." Jiwoo looked tired. Managing humanity's expansion into a war-torn galaxy was exhausting work. "Tell me something good, Doctor." "Both alien civilizations have become too specialized. The Vorthak have spent 3,000 years perfecting crystal technology and logical thinking. The Nexari have spent the same time developing bioweapons and adaptation, but they've lost something important." "What's that?" "They've forgotten how to be creative. When faced with a new problem, they can only use solutions they've used before. We're so primitive that we solve every problem from scratch." Dr. Yunji pulled up holographic displays showing Vorthak and Nexari ship designs. "Look at this. Vorthak ships haven't changed design in 1,000 years. Nexari bioforms follow the same evolutionary patterns they established centuries ago. They're stuck in their ways, but humans? We evolved as persistence hunters and problem solvers. When we see a wall, we don't just try to break through it. We look for ways around it, under it, or over it. We turn problems into puzzles." This was proven again when Captain So Young encountered a Vorthak patrol fleet near the Centauri system. Instead of running or fighting, she did something that confused the crystal ships completely. So Young ordered her crew to turn off all their weapons and shields. Then she began broadcasting children's songs from Earth on all frequencies, while her ship performed what looked like a dance, spinning and looping through space in patterns that made no military sense. The Vorthak ships stopped their attack approach and just watched. They had never seen anything like it. Their tactical computers couldn't process what they were seeing because it didn't fit any known combat pattern. "Unknown vessel," came the cold Vorthak voice. "Explain your behavior. We're celebrating." So Young replied cheerfully, "It's my daughter's birthday back on Earth. Would you like to join the party?" The silence that followed lasted for several minutes. Finally, the Vorthak ship simply flew away without another word. They didn't know how to respond to an invitation to a birthday party in the middle of a war zone. Engineer Boram was having her own success with impossible tactics. When a Nexari swarm attacked the cargo hauler she was traveling on, she convinced the captain to let her try something experimental. Boram had noticed that Vorthak crystal weapons worked by focusing energy into precise beams. What if they could use that against the Nexari? She quickly welded mirrors and reflective panels all over the outside of their cargo ship, turning it into a giant disco ball floating in space. When the Nexari bioships arrived and began their attack, they found something unexpected waiting for them. A nearby Vorthak patrol chose that moment to engage the Nexari forces. But instead of hitting their enemies, the crystal beams struck Boram's mirror-covered ship and scattered in all directions. The reflected energy struck both Vorthak and Nexari vessels randomly, causing confusion and friendly fire incidents. Both fleets became so busy trying to avoid hitting themselves that they forgot about the human cargo ship entirely. Boram's ship escaped while the two alien fleets retreated in different directions, both wondering what had just happened. Pilot Jaehwan was developing his own reputation for impossible flying. When his courier ship was caught between two massive fleets near a gas giant, he did something that should have been suicide. Instead of trying to outrun the alien ships, Jaehwan flew directly toward the gas giant at maximum speed. The pursuing Vorthak and Nexari vessels followed, expecting an easy kill. But Jaehwan had calculated something the aliens missed. He used the gas giant's gravity to slingshot his small ship around the planet at incredible speed, gaining momentum that his primitive engines could never achieve alone. The alien ships, with their more advanced but rigid propulsion systems, couldn't match the maneuver. They watched in amazement as the tiny human vessel shot away from them at impossible velocity, using the planet itself as a catapult. How did he do that? Both alien commanders asked their crews at the same time. Neither side had an answer. In 3,000 years of war, no one had thought to use gravity as a weapon. These incidents were reported throughout both empires, causing confusion and concern at the highest levels. Tactical analysts on both sides began studying human behavior, trying to find patterns they could predict and counter. But that was the problem. There were no patterns. Humans didn't follow standard military doctrine because they didn't have standard military doctrine. Every human captain solved problems differently, using whatever materials and ideas they had available. The Vorthak Empire had fought the Nexari Collective for 3 millennia, using the same strategies, the same technologies, the same thinking. Both sides knew exactly what to expect from each other. Humans were completely unpredictable. They turned life support systems into weapons, mirrors into tactical advantages, and gravity into propulsion. They celebrated birthdays in war zones and treated deadly encounters like puzzles to solve. For the first time in centuries, both alien civilizations were facing something they couldn't understand or counter. The war that had seemed eternal suddenly had a new variable, one that followed no rules because it didn't know the rules existed. Crystal Commander Velthera and biostrategist Mordella began to realize that these primitive humans might be the most dangerous species either empire had ever encountered, not because of their technology, but because of their inability to think like everyone else in the galaxy. The eternal war was about to change, whether the aliens wanted it to or not. The meeting chamber was hidden deep in an asteroid field where no one would think to look. It was neutral ground, a place that belonged to neither the Vorthak Empire nor the Nexari Collective. The chamber itself was simple, built by an ancient species that had died out long before the war began. Crystal Commander Velthara arrived first. Her crystal body reflected the dim lights of the chamber as she waited. She had never imagined she would be in a place like this, preparing to meet with her greatest enemy. Biomarshal Kreenox entered through the opposite door. His form was fluid and ever-changing, like living liquid that had learned to think. Tentacles writhed around his core while smaller organisms crawled across his surface, tasting the air for danger. For a moment, they simply stared at each other. 3,000 years of hatred hung between them like a wall. Their people had killed each other's families, destroyed each other's worlds, and turned entire star systems into graveyards. "This is unthinkable," Velthara said. Her voice was cold as always, but there was something new in it. Uncertainty. "Yet here we are," Kreenox replied. His voice bubbled up from deep within his liquid form. "The humans have forced us to consider the impossible." They had come here for one reason. In just 18 months, humans had spread across 47 star systems. They traded with everyone, fought with no one, and somehow made both empires look foolish every time they tried to stop them. "Show me the reports," Velthara demanded. Kreenox released a small organism that projected holographic images into the air between them. Battle reports, tactical analyses, and confused testimonies from commanders on both sides. Human ship Dancing Bear had escaped from a Vorthak siege by pretending to be a space whale. The captain had somehow programmed his engines to produce the same energy signature as the massive creatures that lived in deep space. The Vorthak ships had been so confused they let him swim away. Human vessel Lucky Dragon had disabled 3 Nexari biocruisers by broadcasting cooking shows. The educational programs about preparing food had somehow interfered with the bio-ship's digestion processes, making them too sick to fight. Human transport. Brave Turtle had avoided capture by both fleets by flying backwards through an entire battle, its captain claiming he wanted to see how the fight turned out, while escaping in the wrong direction. "This is madness," Velthara said after reviewing the reports. "They have no consistent strategy. No logical battle plans. How do we fight an enemy that makes no sense?" "We cannot," Kreenox admitted. "And that is why I am here." The idea was unthinkable. For 3,000 years, neither side had ever considered working with the other. But the humans had changed everything. They were forcing both empires to face an uncomfortable truth. Neither side knew how to deal with complete unpredictability. Meanwhile, Commodore Sung-min was demonstrating exactly why the aliens were so confused. His strategy was called asymmetric diplomacy, which was a fancy way of saying he made up the rules as he went along. When a Vorthak battle fleet surrounded his small convoy near the Polaris system, Sung-min did something unprecedented. He surrendered. "Attention Vorthak vessels," he broadcast on all frequencies. "We surrender completely, we give up." "You win." The Vorthak ship stopped moving. In 3,000 years of war, no one had ever surrendered. Both sides fought to the death because that was the way war worked. "Explain your surrender terms," the Vorthak commander demanded. "We have no terms," Sung-min replied cheerfully. "We just give up. You can have our ships, our cargo, everything. We'll even throw in some Earth coffee as a bonus." The Vorthak fleet held position for 6 hours while their command structure tried to figure out what to do with enemies who had completely surrendered. They had protocols for defeating enemies, destroying enemies, and capturing enemies. But they had no protocols for enemies who just gave up and offered them coffee. Finally, the Vorthak ships simply flew away. They couldn't process the situation, so they chose to pretend it never happened. Captain Yu-jin had her own approach to confusing the enemy. When her medical transport was intercepted by both Vorthak and Nexari forces at the same time, she found herself in the middle of a 3-way standoff. Instead of picking a side or trying to escape, Yu-jin began broadcasting surrender offers to individual enemy ships. "Vorthak vessel number 3. We surrender to you specifically," she announced. "Nexari bioship with the purple tentacles. We also surrender to you personally. We surrender to everyone who wants us to surrender." The result was chaos. Both fleets began arguing about who had the right to accept the human surrender. Vorthak ships started claiming priority over specific Nexari vessels. Nexari bioships began fighting each other for the privilege of capturing the humans. Within an hour, both fleets were shooting at each other instead of the human ship, which quietly slipped away while the aliens sorted out their surrender protocols. Lieutenant Do Hyun specialized in what he called tactical cowardice. When his scout ship was chased by superior forces, he would run away in the most obvious and pathetic manner possible, but his retreats were carefully planned. Do-hyun would lead enemy fleets through asteroid fields, past black holes, and into areas where other enemy forces were operating. His apparent cowardice would lure aliens into traps they had set for themselves. One Nexari commander chased Do-hyun's ship for 3 days, thinking he was pursuing a frightened human who was running randomly through space. Instead, Do-hyun led the bioships directly into a Vorthak mining operation, where both fleets immediately began fighting each other and forgot about the human entirely. Dr. Minho was making his own discoveries about why human tactics worked so well. As an anthropologist, he studied alien cultures and behaviors. What he found was shocking. "Admiral," he reported to Jiwoo during their weekly briefing, "I don't think either alien civilization remembers how to end wars." "What do you mean?" "Look at their cultural records. For 3,000 years, both sides have organized their entire societies around eternal conflict. They don't have words for peace treaty in their languages. They literally don't know what peace looks like." Dr. Minho pulled up charts showing Vorthak and Nexari social structures. Both civilizations had evolved to support permanent warfare. Their economies depended on making weapons. Their politics focused on military strategy. Their children were raised to be soldiers. "They're trapped," Minho continued. "Even if they wanted to stop fighting, they don't know how. Their cultures would collapse without the war to hold them together." This gave General Insu an idea so audacious that it took his breath away. What if humans didn't try to win the war? What if they tried to end it entirely? "You're talking about forcing peace on two civilizations that have been fighting since before humans discovered fire," Jiwoo said when Insu explained his plan. "Exactly. They can't choose peace because they've forgotten it exists. But maybe we can remind them." The plan was called Operation Mirror, and it would require every human ship, every human crew, and every ounce of human creativity they could gather. Back in the secret meeting chamber, Velthera and Kreenox were reaching their own conclusions. "Joint operations," Velthera said, the words tasting strange in her crystal mouth. "Against the human threat, coordinated strikes. Shared intelligence," Kreenox agreed, his form rippling with distaste at the idea. They began planning something that had never happened in galactic history: cooperation between the Vorthak Empire and Nexari Collective. Not peace, just temporary alliance against a common enemy. But as they planned, neither alien commander realized they were already proving the humans right. For the first time in 3,000 years, Vorthak and Nexari were talking to each other instead of shooting. The humans were already changing the war just by being themselves. They didn't know about the secret meeting, but they had forced their greatest enemies to sit in the same room and work together. It was the first step towards something neither empire could imagine. The end of everything they had ever known. The eternal war was about to face its greatest challenge. Not from superior weapons or better tactics, but from a species that refused to accept that any conflict was truly permanent. Operation Mirror was about to begin, and the galaxy would never be the same. Admiral Jiwoo stood on the bridge of the New Sol and looked out at the stars. She had dreamed of this moment her entire life. Humanity had finally built ships that could travel faster than light. After centuries of being trapped on Earth and a few nearby planets, they were ready to explore the galaxy. The year was 2387, and everything seemed possible. The New Sol was humanity's first real exploration ship. It was not the biggest or the fastest, but it was theirs. Jiwoo felt proud as she watched her crew work at their stations. These were the best people Earth had to offer. "Admiral, we're approaching the edge of known space," reported Lieutenant Hyun-woo from his communication station. He was young and excited, just like everyone else on the ship. "Should we slow down?" "Not yet," Jiwoo said. "Let's see what's out here." She had no idea that they were about to fly into the middle of a war that had been going on since before humans learned to write. The galaxy seemed quiet and peaceful from where they sat. The stars looked friendly and welcoming, but deep space was never as empty as it looked. The first sign of trouble came when their sensors picked up something strange. 3 large objects were moving toward them at incredible speed. They were shaped like giant crystal formations, sharp and cold and beautiful in a deadly way. "Unknown contacts," called out Ensign So-young from the sensor station. "They don't match any Earthship designs." Jiwoo felt her heart race. This was it, humanity's first contact with alien life. She had practiced this moment 100 times in simulations, but the real thing felt completely different. "Try to make contact," she ordered Hyun-woo. "All frequencies. Let them know we're peaceful." But before Hyunwoo could send a message, the alien ships were already talking to them. A voice came through the speakers, cold and emotionless like winter wind. Unknown vessel. You will stop and prepare for scanning. Resistance will result in destruction. The voice spoke perfect English, which was strange and frightening. How did aliens know human language? How long had they been watching Earth? This is Admiral Jiwoo of the Earth vessel New Seoul, she replied. We come in peace. We're explorers from the planet Earth. There was a long silence. Then the alien voice spoke again, and this time it sounded almost amused. Earth. Yes, we have been aware of your species for some time. You are primitive but potentially useful as servants. You will surrender your vessel for processing. Servants? Jiwoo felt anger rise in her chest. Humanity had just taken its first steps into the galaxy, and already someone wanted to make them slaves. We respectfully decline, she said through gritted teeth. The alien ships moved closer. Up close, they were even more impressive and terrifying. Each one was like a mountain of crystal, covered in sharp spikes and glowing with blue energy. They were beautiful in the way that deadly things could be beautiful. I am Crystal Commander Velthara of the Vorthak Empire, the voice announced. Your primitive technology poses no threat to us. You will comply or be destroyed. This is the way of war. War. The word hung in the air like a curse. Jiwoo realized that humanity had not just met aliens. They had met aliens who were already fighting someone else. We are not part of your war, Jiwoo said. We just want to explore and learn. Neutrality is not permitted. You serve the Empire or you die. Choose quickly. The crystal ships began to glow brighter. Their weapons were charging. Jiwoo could see death approaching, and there was nothing her small exploration ship could do to stop it. The New Seoul had no military weapons. It was built for science and discovery, not fighting. But Captain So Young had an idea. So Young commanded the escort destroyer Busan Rising, one of 3 small warships that had come with the exploration mission. Her ship was tiny compared to the alien vessels, but it was fast and had some weapons. Admiral, So Young's voice came over the radio. I'm going to try something. When I give the signal, have all ships fire their chemical rockets at the same time. Not at the aliens, just fire them into space. Chemical rockets? Those were the most basic propulsion system humans had. They seemed useless against crystal technology that could travel between stars. But Jiwoo trusted So Young. The captain had always been clever. All ships, Jiwoo announced. Prepare chemical rockets on Captain So Young's command. The Vorthak ships moved into attack position. Their crystal weapons were fully charged now, ready to turn the human fleet into space dust. Crystal Commander Velthara spoke one last time. Your time is over. The Empire claims your ships and your lives. Now, So Young shouted. 5 human ships fired their chemical rockets all at once, not at the enemy but in random directions around them. The rockets exploded harmlessly in space, creating clouds of hot gas and metal particles. For a moment, nothing seemed to happen. The Vorthak ships continued their attack approach. Then something strange occurred. The crystal ships began to slow down. Their perfect formations became confused. The blue glow of their weapons flickered and dimmed. What is happening? Velthara's voice no longer sounded cold and confident. For the first time, it sounded uncertain. So Young grinned on her bridge. The chemical exhaust is interfering with their crystal sensors. They navigate using some kind of energy field, and our primitive rockets are disrupting it. It was working, but not for long. The Vorthak ships were already adapting, trying to see through the chemical clouds. Humanity had maybe 2 minutes before the aliens figured out how to deal with this trick. Lieutenant Hyunwoo had his own idea. While the enemy was confused, he began broadcasting on every radio frequency the human ships had. Not messages, just noise. Random static, music from Earth, even old television shows. The effect was immediate and shocking. The Vorthak ships suddenly stopped moving completely. Their formations fell apart. Some of them began drifting aimlessly. Impossible. Velthara's voice was full of confusion. How are you transmitting on so many frequencies simultaneously? Your technology should not permit this. But it was possible, because humans had built their communication systems differently than the aliens expected. Where the Vorthak used perfect crystal networks that shared information instantly, humans used multiple separate systems that could all work at the same time. The crystal ships began to retreat, not quickly but definitely moving away from the human fleet. This encounter is concluded, Velthara announced. You have been noted. And just like that, the Vorthak ships turned and flew away at impossible speed, disappearing into the darkness between stars. The human crews sat in stunned silence. They had just survived humanity's first contact with alien life. Not only survived, but actually made the superior aliens retreat. How did we do that? So Young asked over the radio. Their ships were 10 times bigger than ours. Jiwoo was wondering the same thing. The Vorthak had better technology, better weapons, better everything. But somehow human tactics had worked against them. I think, Hyunwoo said slowly. They weren't ready for us to do things differently. They expected us to fight the way they fight. But we don't know their rules, so we broke them without meaning to. That was the moment humanity realized something important. The galaxy was full of ancient civilizations that had been doing things the same way for thousands of years. They had rules for war, rules for technology, rules for everything. But humans were new. They didn't know the rules, so they made up their own. News of the encounter spread quickly through both the human fleet and, unknown to them, throughout the alien empires. For the first time in centuries, something completely unexpected had happened in the galaxy. The Vorthak Empire and their enemies, the Nexari Collective, both began to take notice of these strange new creatures who fought with chemical rockets and random radio noise. Neither side realized that they had just met the one thing that could change their eternal war forever, something that didn't follow the rules because it didn't know they existed. Humanity had arrived in the galaxy, and nothing would ever be the same. Captain Daeho pressed his face against the cold metal of the observation window. His breath made small clouds on the glass as he watched the distant stars. They looked peaceful from here, but he knew better. Out there, a war was raging that had been going on for longer than anyone could remember. The ship Serenity's Edge moved slowly through space. It was not a warship. It carried food, medicine, and supplies to the few places in the galaxy that were still safe. Daeho had been making these runs for 10 years, and every trip was more dangerous than the last. "Captain," called Hana from the engine room. Her voice came through the old speaker system with a crackling sound. "The engines are running hot again. We need to stop soon." Daeho sighed. Everything on his ship was old and breaking down. New parts were hard to find when half the galaxy was a war zone. "How long can we keep going?" "Maybe 6 hours if we're lucky." That was not good news. They were still 2 days away from the nearest safe port. But stopping in open space was even more dangerous. Both sides in the war shot first and asked questions later. Taemin looked up from his navigation console. The young man's face was pale with worry. "Captain, I'm picking up something on the long-range sensors." "It's big." Daeho moved to look at the screen. What he saw made his heart race. 2 massive fleets were heading toward each other near the Kepler 442 system. One fleet was made of ships that looked like they were carved from giant crystals. The other fleet had ships that seemed alive, with curves and bumps like sea creatures. The Vorthak Empire and the Nexari Collective were about to fight another battle, and Serenity's Edge was right in their path. "Change course," Daeho ordered. "Take us around the system." "Sir, that will add 3 days to our journey. The people on Refuge Station are waiting for medical supplies." Daeho knew Taemin was right. People would die if they were late. But people would definitely die if they flew into a space battle. "Do it anyway. We can't help anyone if we're dead." But as they changed course, the fleets moved too. The crystal ships of the Vorthak spread out in perfect formations. Each ship was exactly the same distance from the others. Their weapons glowed with cold blue light. The Vorthak did everything with perfect order and logic. The Nexari ships looked completely different. They moved like a school of fish, flowing around each other in smooth patterns. Their hulls were dark and wet-looking. Some had tentacles that reached out to touch nearby ships. The Nexari had grown their ships instead of building them. These two races had been fighting for 3,000 years. Nobody remembered how the war started. Maybe it was about territory. Maybe it was about resources. Maybe they just hated each other for being different. It didn't matter anymore. The war had become everything they knew. "Captain, they're starting to fire," Taemin said. The battle began with flashes of light across the darkness of space. Vorthak crystal beams cut through the vacuum like swords made of pure energy. When they hit Nexari ships, the living hulls would burn and scream in frequencies that hurt to hear. The Nexari fired back with weapons that seemed to grow from their ships like flowers blooming. Bioplasma bolts that could eat through metal and crystal alike. When they hit Vorthak vessels, the perfect crystal structures would crack and shatter. Daeho had seen battles before, but never this close. The power being unleashed was beyond belief. A single shot from either side could destroy his entire ship without even noticing it was there. "We need to get out of here." Haina's voice came through the speaker. She sounded scared, and Hana was never scared. But as they tried to escape, 3 Vorthak destroyer ships noticed them. The crystal vessels were small compared to the main battle fleet, but they were still 10 times bigger than Serenity's Edge. They moved toward the trading ship with deadly purpose. "Unknown vessel," came a cold voice over the radio. It spoke in perfect, emotionless tones. "You are in a restricted war zone. Submit for inspection or be destroyed." Daeho's hand shook as he reached for the communication controls. "This is Captain Daeho of the trading vessel Serenity's Edge. We are neutral. We carry medical supplies to civilian populations. Neutrality is not recognized during active combat operations. You have 30 seconds to comply." 30 seconds. Daeho looked at his crew. Hana had come up from the engine room. Her usually dirty coveralls were clean, which meant she had been too worried to work. Taemin was staring at his controls like they might save them somehow. These were good people. They had families. Hana had a daughter on New Busan Station who was starting school next month. Taemin was saving money to marry his girlfriend. They didn't deserve to die because 2 alien races couldn't stop fighting. 20 seconds, the Vorthak voice announced. The Nexari were too busy fighting the main Crystal Fleet to notice one small trading ship, but the Vorthak destroyers had nothing else to do. Their weapons were already charging. Daeho could see the blue glow building in their crystal arrays. 10 seconds. There was nowhere to run. The Vorthak ships were faster. There was nowhere to hide. Space was empty here. All Daeho could do was watch as the aliens prepared to kill them for being in the wrong place, at the wrong time. 5 seconds. Daeho closed his eyes and thought about his home on Earth. He had left there 20 years ago to see the galaxy. Back then, it had seemed like such an adventure. Now he wished he had stayed home and become a farmer like his father wanted. Time expired. Firing. But the shot never came. Instead, there was a brilliant flash of light as a Nexari biocruiser crashed into the lead Vorthak destroyer. Both ships exploded in a ball of fire that lit up half the system. The other 2 Vorthak ships forgot about Serenity's Edge. They turned to fight the new Nexari threat. Within minutes, all 3 alien vessels were destroyed by weapons that could crack planets. Daeho didn't wait to see who won. He ordered Taemin to jump to faster-than-light speed as soon as they were clear of the battle zone. They escaped, but barely. As they flew toward Refuge Station, Daeho thought about what he had seen. The war between the Vorthak Empire and Nexari Collective was not just about territory or resources. It had become something worse. It was a war that existed just to keep existing. Both sides fought because fighting was all they knew how to do. The galaxy was dying because of it. Trade routes were cut off. Entire star systems were abandoned. Billions of people lived in fear, never knowing when the war might come to their world, and there seemed to be no end in sight. The Vorthak had their perfect crystal technology and cold logic. The Nexari had their living ships and adaptive bioweapons. Neither side could win completely, but neither side could lose either. It was a war that would go on forever, consuming everything in its path, until something changed, until someone found a different way. But what could possibly change a war that had raged for 3,000 years?